So Michael, I'm going to just formally announce you, just so everyone knows who you
Right.
are. Because I had a few people asking me, well, who is Michael? And so Michael is Michael. Thank you very much for coming to my show today. Michael is a professor of social policy from UVic, a political scientist. He's a disability advocate, a media pundit, and an award-winning author. It's my pleasure to have you join our conversation today on my show.
Thank you, Brent. Delighted to be here.
Yeah, so getting to some of the great topics. I guess the hot topic of the day. I mean, yeah, you can tell me what you would like to talk about.
Sure.
Definitely. One of the top topics is as you've probably been seeing on social media, one of the great advocates right now is the Disability Without Poverty. They're just amazing people that run that Twitter space there. I mean, a Twitter
Yep.
group. They've been taking a lot of good questions from people and kind of seeing where people are at, like and what I've been hearing and seeing is about the Canada Disability Benefit Program. And yeah, it's apparently like a 3-year study they want to do, but I'm going to let you
Sure.
kind of go over all that stuff, and I'll just mute my mic and just for a few minutes here.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Brent. And whenever you want to cut in or ask a question, I'm happy to stop. So, yeah, as I think a lot of your listeners will know, the Canada Disability Benefit, as an idea, has been around for many, many years. At least I can think back 15, 20 years where a number of different disability organizations and disability advocates have been strongly recommending the need for a better way to provide income support, income security to people living with disabilities across Canada, and particularly at the national level. People are probably familiar with provincial disability assistance. Sometimes we call it here in BC PWD, Persons with Disabilities, which was an old name for the program, but disability benefits, disability assistance, the name varies across the country, but there are many historic limitations to those programs, and groups have been pushing for a more adequate, livable income for Canadians with disabilities for a long time. So I think people were pleased to and pleasantly surprised to see in the previous government, Trudeau government, before the last election in 2020, which seems a long time ago now, in COVID time, they announced in a throne speech that they were committed to introducing what they were calling a Canada Disability Benefit for working age persons with disabilities. That basically means people between the ages of 18 to 64. Although I say working age, the plan is that the benefit would not require any labor force or work history or labor force attachment. It wouldn't be a program that would have an employment test, although the population being targeted is what we usually call the working age population, which raises some questions which we can talk about, well, what about people under 18 with disabilities, and what about people who are seniors or 65 and older? If they don't qualify for this benefit, what does it mean for them? So it's a program that's been talked about. The previous government actually tabled a bill in the House of Commons in June 2021, Bill C-35. Some people refer to that on social media. It got tabled in the House, and then about a day later, the House recessed for the summer. The Prime Minister then called a snap election that summer, and you'll remember we had an election last fall, and we had the return of another minority government. And with that new government, we had Minister Carla Qualtrough, who had been the minister responsible for disability inclusion and disability issues in the previous government, got the same job, same position again in this new cabinet of Mr. Trudeau's, and so she continues to be responsible for overseeing the design and the implementation of the Canada Disability Benefit. And that was spelled out very specifically in a mandate letter, which is basically her terms of reference and instructions from the Prime Minister as to what expectations are for her in her job over the next year or two at least. And you're right, you referred to a 3-year consultation process that was discussed in the last federal budget, where there was some money set aside several $1 million to help fund a extensive set of accessible and inclusive consultations with a wide range of groups across the country over the next year or so. Some groups are concerned that a 3-year time frame for consultations seems awfully long, and that means people will have to wait for quite a while still to see any money coming from any new benefits. So there, as you can see in social media, there's a lot of people who are quite anxious, frustrated, worried why they have to wait so long. And I think, a lot of people in the disability community and allies feel that as well, that there's a tension around, on the one hand, wanting to consult, make sure people's voices are heard, ideas are shared, like the organization Disability Without Poverty, which is engaged very much in that kind of dialogue and inclusive approach to policy development. And that takes time to do that properly and meaningfully. On the other hand, people are in poverty and they need money sooner rather than later. So there's kind of a push-pull as to let's talk, let's convene, let's contemplate and discuss and recommend some ideas, but can we do it fast? Because we know people are in real need. And so that's kind of where the play is right now. I'm happy to talk about some of the more ideas or principles and details that may be emerging over the coming weeks and months, but I'm pleased to be on your show because this is a great time to spread the word and encourage people to share their thoughts. If they belong to organizations, your organization may already be involved in developing a position paper, or perhaps they're working with Disability Without Poverty or other disability organizations. That's great. If they're not, maybe think about reaching out and forging some further alliances and coalitions to get this going. And since we agreed to have this interview, Brent, we had the interesting news earlier this week of an agreement between Mr. Trudeau's Liberal government and the NDP, and under their leader of Jagmeet Singh, and that there's an agreement between the two parties now to basically let Parliament continue to work till 2025, which gives us a sense of stability and predictability as to how long this Parliament was actually going to last as a minority Parliament. So I think that's good news for this issue. It's also good news in that the NDP have been quite supportive of a guaranteed livable income, and whether it's for all Canadians as a universal guaranteed income, but they've also focused very much in the last many months around the needs of Canadians with disabilities who live in poverty. So I think given what Minister Qualtroux's mandate is of designing and implementing the Canada Disability Benefit, and now this formal agreement between the NDP and the Liberal parties in the House of Commons, I think is a positive development in that we've got some predictability now and stability, and Parliament being around long enough for this to be done, to get legislation introduced and debated and hopefully passed, and then a benefit starting to flow out to people. Fingers crossed, sometime next year, I would hope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly, Michael. You nailed it on that, on those key points there. Like as you say, I mean, there's so many people that are anxious, and I've seen that too. And they're reaching out and thinking that the government doesn't care. And I mean, there's so much. I mean, I know that it's how it comes across, but there's so much the work that's being done that behind the scenes that it's not all getting published on social media. I know that a lot of the MPs and the MLAs are all kind of working together collaboratively behind the scenes, working across like provincial jurisdictions and talking to provinces and how is this going to work? Because like there's so many provinces that have they don't even have a persons with disabilities designation in their province, so that's kind of a stumbling block that they have to try to work with the feds have to work on.
Absolutely.
And the other part too is people, like I said at the beginning of the show, like like a 3-year study. Well, I mean, people need money now. Like I mean, they're inflation's it's just eroding away at their incomes. Their rates are like well below 40% below poverty line. So I mean, what I'm thinking is like, and I've mentioned to some MPs I've had on my show is an intern amount in the meantime while they actually work on doing the framework and the implementation of the program and get the checks out there to people in the meantime. It's kind of like how they did CERB, right? When they got CERB out there, they got it going, and then they can just figure things out later. It's kind of like the same thing. Like they get it out, we'll figure this out, program out, and the other part on that is these people won't be suffering, but also with that same topic. I think also that having like the GLBI, I'll get you to kind of maybe explain a little bit about this too. Is
Sure.
I think a lot of people might be not sure. Okay, well, are they going to go with a GLBI? Or are they going with the Canada Disability Benefit? Maybe if you have maybe some kind of overview of that, of
Sure.
how does all that work? I mean, what are they going with, and that way you can kind of straighten it out.
Yeah. Well, usually when we hear about there's different terms. You're absolutely right, but one that's been around for a long time is usually referred to as UBI, which is Universal Basic Income, and the universal usually is meant to suggest that it's to be for all Canadians of a certain income need, perhaps, and that they would be guaranteed a certain amount of money for living on. And then there's a variation of that is the guaranteed living basic income, or GLBI, and that's trying to get at, well, what does adequate living amount mean? So universal means kind of suggests broad coverage. When we start to use phrases like guaranteed adequate or guaranteed living income, we're thinking of something more than just quite basic and just subsistence level, which quite frankly is what welfare is. It's something more adequate. The conversation we're having around Canada Disability Benefit is more what might be called a population-based or a categorical approach to providing some kind of basic income. So rather than universal for all Canadians, we're sort of, as we've done with seniors, as we have programs for veterans, or we have programs for students with disabilities, or we have programs for families with young children who live in low income. We have a variety of what might be called population-based or categorical programs. And so people with disabilities, there isn't really a program broadly defined at the national level for Canadians with disabilities who live in low income. We have the Canada Pension Plan, which is primarily a retirement program, but it also has the disability benefit associated with it, the CPPD, we call it, Canada Pension Plan Disability. But to qualify for that, as you well know, Brent, you need to have had a work history. You need to have been in the labor force for a good number of years. And so for people who have had very limited employment opportunities or face barriers and challenges in their life and in the work world, and really don't have much employment history, the CPPD is not really an option for them. We have the disability tax credit, very controversial program, very complicated tax credit, and it's a non-refundable program, which means for people who have no income tax or reportable income tax every year, it's of no benefit to them. And so there's tens of thousands of low-income Canadians with disabilities who really the disability tax credit is of no real use or purpose for them. So there's a gap at the federal level for some kind of program for low-income Canadians with disabilities. And so that's where we kind of have arrived at. And so although a number of groups, and including the NDP federally, who have been champions of the idea of a universal basic income, a UBI, for a number of years, and a number of disability groups say the same thing now. We still see that as a long-term goal, but in the immediate future, there seems to be political interest, momentum, and public support, quite honestly, for the notion of a new income program specifically for Canadians with disabilities to help lift them out of poverty.